We shout and scream, but it's just a silly dream.
And I know what I saw, and I think it's important that people know what I saw, because, you know, I believe Madeleine was abducted.
And we hold it inside, like it's live or die. Till in the end we learn to wait, and we squeeze the hands of fate, and we twist and turn, we freeze and burn. But I don't care how near or far, I'll find you wherever you are. You will, I'll find you wherever you go. Through time and space, I'll always see your face, and if I must count every star, how near or far, I'll find you wherever you are. You know, I'll find you wherever you go. So far, I'll find you wherever you are. You know, I'll find you wherever you go. Through time and space, I'll always see your face, and if I must count every star, how near or far, I'll find you wherever you are. You know, I'll find you wherever you go. So far, I'll find you wherever you are. You know, I'll find you wherever you go.
Well, hi everyone, and welcome to another Madeleine Live. We're a little bit earlier than we used to be on a Saturday. Usually it was about 3, but anyway, we're at 1 o'clock today here in Toronto, and so that makes it 6 o'clock in UK. And I'm not sure if, we do have somebody in chat. There wasn't anybody just now, but welcome to everyone that's watching. And I want to let you know, I got inspired to do this live from one of the groups. I do have my own group, HiDeHo Controversy, which Cherry and Kerry carefully look after. But there is another private group, What Really Happened to Madeleine McCann. And I was inspired because it's such a busy for a group that so many of the questions keep getting asked often. And so what I did, I've invited Kenny here, who is one of the more prolific posters in that group. Hi, Kenny.
Hi, Lizzie. Welcome to everyone.
And yeah, thank you for being here, because now I usually have Shirley helping me, and she wasn't able to do it today. Now, the thing is, Shirley is really good because she monitors chat for me and then pops up the questions or anything, any comments in the chat. I'm pretty hopeless at actually seeing them and doing that. So anyway, we'll see how we go. We're going to be playing it by ear because we really don't know if we're going to get any questions and what they might be. But we do have some that we'd post that have been posted on the group, which I have, and I can refer to those. So what's your interest in the Madeleine case, Kenny?
I think I'm like most people who take an interest. It's the mystery of what happened to Madeleine, and there's a lot of negativity that's brought to several forums and groups and whatever. But I have no negativity at all. I'm just like most people who are trying to solve a mystery or looking at something that's a little bit unusual, cold cases they call them, the Jean Benet mystery, etc. And I'm just intrigued by it all. And the more you look into it, and the more you look at the videos that you make and other people and the podcasts, you then start to ask yourself questions and you get drawn into the mystery and debate.
Yeah. And you were mentioning earlier about Mark Sonakonoko's podcast. And that is probably one of the greatest reference points, actually, for anybody who's not fully aware of the case, who just has maybe the basics. But Mark goes through, I think there was either 10 or 13 different videos, and he really is a real investigative journalist, unlike many others. And being in Australia, he's not as limited as the UK. But anyway, his podcast, I mean, we just fully support it. We actually helped Mark with it when he was doing it. So I trust the subject matter content for the most part. Yeah. So anyway, what I think I want to start with, because there's so many questions that we see popping up time and time again. And if there's anybody who has any questions, by all means, please put them in the chat and I will attempt to answer them. Now, because Shirley is not here, I'm looking at chat and I'm getting distracted. But hi there, Peter. Peter, you made it in. Good to see you here. And actually, all the others, Sue and Jane and Chris and good old Revy and Lisa, thank you so much for being here. Yeah, as I was saying, what I want to start with is one of the biggest issues that I have had since basically 2008, and that is the neglect issue. And it actually took me about 3 years before people would hear me. And I did find a chat, a comment that I made in the Missing Madeleine forum back in November of 2009. And I was still asking at that point, is there anybody, am I the only one who feels that the McCanns are getting away with concealing Madeleine's death and faking an abduction, because everyone was so focused on the need to be angry about them, about neglect. So everybody knows if there's a neglect issue, I'm in there, because I just it really bothers me. Did you what did you think of the neglect, Kenny?
Well, until you mentioned it, I was drawn into it in the same way as most people. You then focus on, well, the fact that they've left the children alone that evening. So when you talk about neglect, Lizzie, and your distaste with it, you mean the neglect on the evening of the disappearance of Madeleine?
Yeah, basically, I did initially go with the fact that how could there be neglect if she wasn't there? But since then, I've taken it back further, because from my research and others, Peter included, hi Peter Mack again, we have realized the very good, strong possibility that something happened earlier in the week. So the neglect was an issue that was used to help the McCanns. And I just want to read this out. When people make a post, and this really actually aggravates me a little bit, because I understand how people have an issue about neglect. But what happens, because the McCanns rely on people believing they were neglected and therefore having the opportunity to be abducted, what many don't realize is even if we are not on, believing the McCanns, any comment made about neglecting has, well, let me just read it. To make a post claiming the children were neglected is inadvertently suggesting that there was an opportunity to abduct Maddie. Mm-hmm. The only negative mantra they allow in the media is neglect. And they benefit from everyone that posts about the children being neglected by subconsciously leaving an imprint on everyone's brain that there was an opportunity for the abductor. There was absolutely no evidence whatsoever, except their claims of leaving the children alone. So it's, I think from that, you can realize that neglect is not an issue. And in fact, Jerry insisted that they didn't leave the children alone. That they did leave the children alone. And this little video that I did, actually, our lovely admin, Michelle, may she rest in peace, she used to push this video like crazy. In fact, this is direct from the computer, but online, any of the views you see on this particular video, it's probably our Michelle that did it. So hold on. This shows you how Jerry insists they left them alone.
Opportunity to get into the apartment if you were checking on the children every 15 minutes.
How often did you say we were checking?
15 minutes. No?
That's not what we've said, no? And it's been widely reported that it was about 30 minutes. Now, that was what our checks were.
There we go. I hope that kind of opens up your eyes how Jerry denies watching the children. So have you seen that one before, Kenny?
No, well, I have. I've
You
seen.
might
I've seen.
have.
I've seen it several times. Lizzie, I've watched all your videos over and over again. But it's a good point actually, because I didn't realise until now, well, probably a light bulb moment, that yes, he wants the neglect scenario in the simulation, because it leaves a gap for the abductor. But he insists there, when he raises his hands, whoa, we're not checking too often. We need a bigger gap, just in case somebody picks up that we weren't doing we're actually doing the checks that night. He points out, no, it wasn't every 15 minutes, it was every 30 minutes. So although he's insisting on the neglect, but he also wants to leave enough time for the abductor to get in and out. Hence he says, no, we need 30 minutes to for our checks, because if we done it every 15 minutes, then the likelihood is there wasn't a gap there for the alleged abduction.
They were definitely looking to keep that mantra alive. And when it comes to the reality of it, if you think about it, right from the start, they claimed abduction from the moment Maddie was missing. They claimed abduction. And you have to look at the situation where I looked at this, when one lies, one should lie big and stick to it. And when you look at what the big lie that was by Joseph Goebbels, when you read what the United States Office of, I can't read it, but something, when they looked at it, this is exactly how you have to get to people. And this is what they did. They convinced everybody that it was an abduction, so that then at that point, they were left alone, and that's how it was an abduction. Once Gonzalo Amaral left, Paula Rebello came in, and they went to the apartment, and that's when they decided that they felt there was 7 children in the apartment. Now, what happened to the 8th? Why did they not put 8? I think that tells you a heck of a lot. This wasn't in the files, because this was after the no, it wasn't after the files had been released, but we do know that not everything's been put in the files. The majority of it has, but if you think, in my opinion, maybe we see 5% of the investigation, when you take into account some of the things which they didn't include, but also the thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of intelligence. All we see are the official emails or written files. So there's so much more that we don't know. So neglect for me is one of the big issues that is important. And the part of the importance of it is more so because it answers the questions. A lot of the questions come about neglect. Why weren't they charged with neglect? Well, the reason being is that by Portuguese law, there wasn't actually neglect classified. If I can read it, I'm having trouble here. whoever places another person's life in danger, they're exposing her in a location where she is subject to a situation from which on her own cannot defend herself against, or abandoning the without defense whenever the agent had the duty to guard her, to watch her, over her, or to assist her. This legal type of crime is only fulfilled with intent. And this intent has to cover the creation of danger to the victim's life, as well as the absence of a capacity to defend herself on the victim's behalf. In the case of the files and facing the elements that was collected, it's evident that none of the Arguidos, Jerry or Kate, acted with intent. So for anybody that is asking why they weren't charged with neglect, it's because it's not under the Portuguese law that they did anything, as well as why would they be charging them with neglect when they know there's more involved. So okay, so yeah, was there anything more you wanted to say on that, Kenny?
Yeah, I think you've pointed it out with the Portuguese side of the law, and answered the question correctly there. The intent, they did intend to leave the children before the night of the abductions, the alleged abduction, in the apartment. I believe there was neglect as we see it. But what you're saying is, under Portuguese law, they didn't deliberately intend to do it, and it's in Portuguese. What you're saying is, in Portuguese law, it has to be a deliberate intent, not an accidental intent.
Yeah. Yes. So, okay. Now, there was two things I wanted to cover initially before we look at some of the questions. Now, if we haven't got too many in chat, but if there's any questions anybody wants to know, please add them, because I actually can read that better than I can read what's on the screen. So even though I haven't got Shirley here to help me. So the other question that crops up in the group all the time, and this, remember, is what really happened to Madeleine McCann, private Facebook group, which Kenny he's the man in there, is Operation Grange. Now, I'm pretty much on my own on this one. Everybody is upset with Operation Grange because of the money that they keep asking for every year, and that they didn't want to look at the McCanns. It was all about everything else. I have a totally different take on Operation Grange than I think everybody. Now, you can disagree with me, and I may be wrong, totally wrong, but I've got a different thought for several reasons. First of all, I did speak to many of the detectives back in Operation Grange in 2013, I think it was. And they assured me that everything that was sent in was looked at. In fact, I have one I've got two little videos here of a conversation I had with one of the detectives, or a couple of the detectives. I want to play this one first. If I have time, maybe we'll do the other one. But this one, I think, will kind of give you a little perspective, a positive perspective on Operation Grange.
Yeah. It's very easy to become very narrow-minded about this and sort of tunnel vision and all these sort of things. But we are looking at the whole picture, and we're not just going down one particular line. Okay. Yep. No. Feel free to send me anything you like, and I'll certainly look at it myself, and I'll feed it into our system.
Okay. So
See, that's what's important to us is because there's been such a cover-up, you know, and the lies, the literal lies. I mean, one in particular, if I can just say to you, is that Jerry McCann claims that he came in through a locked door that night in his statement, and yet I have a video that shows him saying, no, we came in through the patio doors because we didn't want to wake the children. Well, that's a direct lie. Now, I've managed to pick that up through my research, and it's an absolute lie. I want to know that those kind of things are known. You know, my videos.
Oh, yeah, those sorts of things are being looked at, yes. Whether they've been looked at or about to be looked at, we go through everything with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah. So
that's why it's been given to a murder team, because this is all work we're used to, and we go through everything.
Does that tell you something? That's why it's been given to a murder team. Now, that on the one part totally disagrees with what we hear from Colin, saying that they are just going, I can't remember what it was about, but they weren't looking at the McCanns. And was there something you wanted to say there, or you just wanted to cough?
No. I would, a bit of both. I think the remit of Operation Grange was...
That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the remit does show that. My thinking at this point, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, okay, we know that it's not their jurisdiction for the McCanns. That's the Portuguese police investigation. But one thing that the Portuguese police cannot do, they don't have the jurisdiction to be able to research the fund. And it could be possible that this is the area that Scotland Yard are working on. And regardless of what you think about what Scotland Yard might be working on, the fact is we know nothing. They have never given us a clue, and they are not likely to give us a clue. And if that's what they're doing, it kind of makes sense that how can they close it and release information about the fund if the Portuguese police haven't yet finished their investigation? And that's why I believe the good possibility that Scotland Yard are hanging on every year, because they can't do anything until the Portuguese police make a move. And when I spoke to one of the detectives, this is when he told me that you'll never hear anything about the investigation. And when you do hear something, because this was around the time when Redmond was releasing the new picture of Maddie, he said, read between the lines. What you think you hear, you don't always, and it kind of fits. It's just a little 3-minute video, so I'm just going to play it.
Like, is that that kind of information something that you follow through on, or are you basically?
No, we do. We have a separate sort of unit which actually does a lot of work around the internet and Facebook and Twitter and all that sort of stuff. They obviously monitor these sites fairly regularly.
Well, they probably know me.
Yeah, they may well do. Yeah, my sort of role really is to talk to real people, and
I am real.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, and try and generate information from them. So hence you talking to me as opposed to talking to one of the geeks in the intelligence unit.
Oh, okay.
But, okay. Well, what I'll do, I'll send you an email, and then if you could send me sort of those snapshots back, and then we'll sort of take it from there. How about that?
Okay. Now, why everybody's so concerned that this investigation is not really focusing on some of the stuff that some of the details that we found in the files. Is that are we totally wrong? Because I'm sticking up for you. If you know what I mean. Everybody's saying, oh, it's a whitewash and this and that, and I said, and I do have a voice in the forum. Like what I say, people do listen to, sadly. But, you know, I'm trying to say that there's techniques that you use.
Yeah.
You know, that...
This whole inquiry is being treated like any other one, any other major inquiry that we would do. We are using the same computer systems, the same analytical methods, the same intelligence gathering methods. So it's basically just like any other inquiry for us. Now, obviously, what we don't do, we don't give a running commentary about what we're doing. You know, we're very loath to engage with the press, to be honest. I mean, we've spent the best part of the year avoiding contact with the press, and it's only really come to light over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
When our boss obviously did an appeal around the age-progressed image, which obviously you'll have seen.
Yeah.
That's the only time really that we've broken cover. So we've been going on with this in our own sort of quiet and diligent way, and we're obviously exploring all the avenues open to us.
Okay, and I think it was that
people supply information to us all the time.
Yeah.
And I assure you, it all gets looked at. Some of it clearly can be discounted pretty swiftly, but everything does get looked at.
Yeah, I think it was that press issue where he pretty much said Madeleine is alive, and quoted the abduction as being possible. Well, we have not yet found anything within that 3-minute period of.
So I think what you might realize from that is that we don't hear a thing. They're not going to tell us anything about what they're investigating. Whether they're in the remit or whatever, they're not mentioning anything. The same as the Portuguese police. They're not giving us any information. So we really can't take anything for granted on that. Right, Kenny?
When you talk about the fund, Lizzie, can you just clarify? It's the fund for Operation Grange, not the Find Madeleine fund that's gone to the parents.
Yes, sorry. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm talking about the fund for Operation Grange when I'm saying about that's what they get each year. But what I'm talking about, the fund that the Portuguese police do not have the jurisdiction over, is the Search for Maddie fund. If there's any fraud involved in the Search for Maddie fund, then the Portuguese police cannot do that. It would have to be British police that dealt with that fund. And if there is fraud, in which case, if, as the Portuguese police claim, the same as many of us, that something happened to Maddie during the holiday and she wasn't abducted, then that goes without saying that that search fund is a fraud.
Well, it's perverting the course of justice.
Yeah, it's
using the fund.
Yeah, it's really sad. Now, there are some questions and answers. Questions. We'll try and give the answers to them. But what I would like to point out is that, as many know, I do believe something happened earlier. And it's only when you start to realize that something happened earlier that a lot of those questions are actually answered, because they can't be answered if nothing had happened to Maddie until Thursday. You know, they're questions like, why were they in the crash all day? Why, lots of those, why did they not go to breakfast? And lots of those questions are answered when you realize that if something happened to Maddie, something was in place. And because the discrepancies, I worked on the discrepancies for 4 years. I took all the statements and put them into hourly timetables. So I had the 9 statements, and what 9 of them said for that particular hour of that particular day. You can see whether they agree or anything, or whether they have really outrageous discrepancies, contradictions, and I'm not talking about a time frame that may have been right or wrong, or even a day, But when there's a specific, let's use, for example, there was one breakfast, I think, on Friday morning, where one of them said, we were the only ones there, nobody else was there. And then one of the others said, yes, we were all there. That's a discrepancy. And that, I believe, is in my timetables. I don't think I've actually released that on a separate discrepancy thing. But yeah, that's a contradiction. It's not just a memory thing. The morning that Maddie goes missing, were they all at breakfast together or weren't they? They'd remember.
Can I just add something there, Liz?
Yes.
I think in the opposite direction, you also have contradictions that try to place Maddie alive on that day as well. And I look at the David Payne statement, where at around 6:30 on the evening, he goes up to visit Kate on Jerry's request to see if everything's okay, and enters the apartment and gives a very vivid description of all the children, including Maddie, and states that they had the best day ever that day. and then Kate contradicts that in her statement, saying that he never entered the apartment. But what that statement says is that Madeleine's alive on that tea time of that day of the alleged abduction. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it's not just that. I mean, he'd remember if he saw her in a towel, as she said she had on, because she just got out of the shower. He'd remember that. He can't. Apparently, I think his statement did say he can't remember what she was wearing. Well, But when you say about how there's specific issues to try and create her being alive on that day. Now, I don't know which day she may have died. I've never claimed that. I've always said something happened to her earlier in the week.
Uh-huh.
And I think one of the main ones is the last picture. Now, there was thousands and thousands and thousands of posts about the last picture being photoshopped and all this, that, and the other. But basically, thanks to Peter Mack, was around. I don't know if you're still listening, Peter. You went through all of the weather issues of that week, and you were able to determine the fact that on the Thursday, this wasn't likely for the Thursday. And in fact, we know that they went to visit the pool on the Sunday, and it was likely on the Sunday. Something else that cropped up to me was this, how when people want to make a point, it's like an odd point that they would say that they stopped for sunglasses on the Tuesday. What that told me was that they're trying to say to everybody, the last picture had to be taken on a Thursday because he didn't have any sunglasses on the Sunday. You know what I mean? It's like they're really going out of their way to establish her being there.
They need to introduce a timeline that doesn't exist. That gets them off the hook.
Oh yeah, that timeline was that's. But actually, there's one thing that's come to mind, is that Rachel did them no favors. Rachel really kind of screwed up, and it's far too complicated to go into right now, but basically she gave us the opportunity to prove that the picture was not taken on the Thursday. And I'm trying to find somebody, maybe it could be you, Kenny, who can understand what I'm trying to explain, because it's a bit of this and a bit of that, and she's lying here, but this, whatever. I know that sounds silly, but it is really complicated, because she is lying and claiming that she saw Maddie for the last time when she was playing tennis on the Thursday. And we know that Maddie's group, anyway, played on the Tuesday. So does that mean that the last time she saw Maddie was on Tuesday? this in combination with Rachel and Jane supposedly playing tennis at the time of the last picture, Jane seeing Maddie, but Rachel didn't see Maddie and had said she only saw her when she was playing tennis. She didn't see her then. So it kind of puts that time frame where, was Rachel really there? Was Jane really there? Were the McCanns really there taking the last picture?
Yeah.
Or, was Maddie really there? And were they taking a picture at all? Anyway, that gets into complicated issues. So somehow I'll figure it out. But anyway, what do you reckon, Kenny, that we start looking at some of the questions that we've been asked?
Yep. I can't see them, so you'll have to mention the questions to me, and I'll try and give a bit of input.
I think hopefully I can show you.
I'll just read them out, Liz, and I'll see. I'll see if I've got any information or any thoughts on the question.
I'm getting there. I know the first one is from Jane. I think this is them. Okay, yeah. Let's see. I got it right. Jane? I saw Jane earlier. I don't know if she's still in there. Her question is, where do you think the McCanns went in the hire car, clocking up all those miles? And now, it takes a bit of research to, I don't know whether you mean in general, over the course of the week, or sorry, over the course of the week, over the course of the time they had the car, or whether you're talking about, I think it was 200 kilometers unaccounted for when they went to Huelva on August the 2nd they went there. But that's all part of something that Kenny and I are planning on doing some research, along with a police friend of his. Right, Kenny?
Yeah. Well, the first question, where do you think the McCanns went with all those miles? Now, the McCanns, it's my understanding that the McCanns hired the car, I think it was the 27th of May. I think it was 3 weeks after the disappearance. Yeah. On the 3rd, 24 days, if you want to be exact. But if you were a suspect, you're going to have excuses and reason to justify the high mileage on the car. And I think he went on some trips away, to the borders of Spain, handing out photographs and leaflets in a bid to try and find his Madeleine.
I think that was the Huelva visit, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Some of the information that you've sent me is it needs a lot of research, but the days that I've focused on just over the last few days on the information that you've sent me is the strange the strange places that they visited in the days around his return from Washington, and that being linked to the time when there was the dogs detected. This is all linked. That the dogs detected blood and cadaver in the boot of the hire car. Now that's linked to. Sorry if I waffle on, but this is linked to the hire car. Jane had a dream, and she phoned the liaison officer, whilst Jerry
Kate.
was in.
You mean Kate had a dream?
Jane. Sorry, Kate. I've got Jane on my mind there. Kate. Yeah, sorry, Jane. I apologise. Kate had a dream. Briefly, she phoned the liaison liaison officer, who could speak fluent English and fluent Portuguese. Jerry was away. She had a dream that Kate died and was buried on the Black
No,
Rock.
she didn't say buried. She said was laying on a hill.
Was well laying,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ricardo Pava was the.
There was it led to the suspicions, which led to the introduction of the dogs.
Yeah.
Now Jerry then returns home. He lands at the airport. He's been away. He hasn't seen his kids for a while. He then Kate goes and picks him up at the airport, I believe, and they head back to Praia da Luz, and they overshoot Praia da Luz. They go to Sigras, I believe it is, and
Sagres, Villa de Bispo. Sometimes the pings, although they're in one place, the pings show another.
But it makes a substantial difference.
Let's call it the triangle.
Yeah, there was a substantial difference. It's not meters away or a few miles away. It's several miles away past Praia da Luz, and then that begs the question: the coincidence of why he's overshot at the same time that Kate has the dream, and then over the next few days, if you link that to the dogs finding a few weeks later alerting in the boot of the car, that coincides with then the excuse or the findings that a bag of meat had been burst open in the boot of the car at the same time that they overshoot Praia da Luz, at the same time that the dogs alert in exactly the same position
around that time.
That time, so it's all linked to the triangle, to the timing of Jerry arriving, overshooting, and conveniently or inconveniently, there's a bag that bursts open and beef blood or whatever and shrimps is leaked into the hire car. Now you then ask the question, these are expert dogs that are brought in from the Met Police, and they can distinguish between human blood and cadaver over and above animal blood. So it's all relevant and all linked.
It is linked, and this is one bit of research that we're just about to embark on. So I'm pretty excited about this because we've always known about their visits, the strange visits to the triangle. Why did they go? I followed a lot of the pings that showed that they started going around June, middle of June. And then around the end of July, they were visiting in the evening for an hour. And then they'd come back. And this was like strange to me. And then all of a sudden on the 28th of July, they didn't go. Now, I've said for quite a few years now that this was possibly the time that they moved Maddie. Then I started to look at, as you were saying, the excuse for the blood found in the car, the cadaver dogs and blood dogs. Just a few days later, after the 28th, when I felt that maybe this was when they moved her, the cadaver dogs discovered what was in the car.
That was August the 6th. August 6th and 7th
but
was when the inspection.
Yeah, the dogs came in on, I think, the 31st of July, a couple of days after what I believe may have moved her body. And then at the end of July is when the trunk was left open. The neighbor saw the trunk left open to get rid of the smell. On, I think, August the 1st is when John Corner arrived. Jerry was supposed to go to the Huelva, I don't know how you say it, but Huelva trip on the 1st, but he said he was sick. Well, that's the day that they went into the villa. The dogs went into the villa. So they visited Huelva on the 2nd with John Corner. And this is where I found a thread that I did that was kind of a huge thread, right? It was in one of my reference forums, and it's been lost for a while. I'm still trying to get the forum back, but I found it on Wayback Machine. And the details involving this trip were just amazing. Somebody saw them at the lights at some point, and there was a missing 2 hours, missing mileage. So basically my research, and Kenny has agreed to do it with a friend of his, is to look at how often they went down to the triangle. Is it possible that Maddie was there? They were hiding her body there. Then when Jerry was in Washington, Kate made that phone call to Ricardo Paiva about seeing in a dream that Maddie was on a hill. And that's when the dogs were brought in a few days later. So was it that he came back from Washington and had to rush down? He spent 2 hours on the Sagres ping. And by the 28th, I think they moved the body. And that was the rush. You know, it's possible that he had to rush to do something because of the dogs. The dogs came in. They went to Huelva. Now, I'm not saying that they moved her body and something happened in Huelva. Is it possible that somebody else drove the car and took her body to Huelva? And, you know, that's where they made the decision what was going to happen, you know, how they were going to hide her. But this is the timeline that suddenly all three issues, the dogs, the triangle, and the visit to Huelva, kind of fit into place within just a few days of each other. And is this the answer to when she was moved and where they at least for a while took her? So it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to doing it with you, Kenny. But of course, I'm really busy right now and I can't get to it. But we will. Just
to summarize that, the little bit of research that I've done on the information that you've provided, it all fits into place. What you've got to look at is the cadaver dog alert was on the 6th of August, and the blood dog went into the underground car park and alerted to blood in the boot of the car on August the 7th. So everything prior to that is in chronological order. If you look at it, it's not out of sync. So it
fits
all
within
fits
those few days.
It all fits into place.
Yeah. Well, we're going to work on that, Kelly, and we will do an update when we could. Who knows what we're going to come up with? You see, this is it. We don't look to make something fit. This is what the files have told us. Let's just see what we can find to see whether or not it fits into place. So, yeah, looking forward to that. So we'll start on that, well, when we can. Now, Jane was also asking something else, and I took it down and I forgot it.
Let's see.
Do you think the children were left alone, or was a group member with them every night? Now, this is one of those questions, in my opinion, that if you believe something happened to Maddie earlier in the week, they would have been looking after the children. And this is what I believe. If nothing happened to her till the Thursday, we probably wouldn't have known anything about them being left alone. They probably would have admitted they're looking after their children, as any normal adult would say when their child was missing. And you know, when you look at that, you realize that they had to say that they weren't looking after them. So I believe they were, and there is actually a video of Gonzalo Amaral claiming that they didn't go through the front doors. They all used to use the back doors. And that's why he felt that Jane Tanner's sighting was, as he claimed, hollow, because he knows somehow that they all went through the back doors. Now, if they all went through the back doors, there's no locks on the back doors. I don't think for 1 second they all left the back doors open. And yeah, there was always somebody missing from the table during the week. I think Monday was the only day we don't have confirmation on, but then it just wasn't mentioned, so we don't know. So no, I don't believe they left their children alone whatsoever. You agree with that, Kenny?
Yeah, I've just picked up on a point there, actually, that you mentioned there, that Amaral believed that, because the back patio door, I believe, you could close the back patio door, but you had to lock it from the inside.
Yeah.
So the only way you could enter the rear patio door was to leave it closed but unlocked,
or to have somebody inside,
or to have somebody inside
changing over.
I believe if she what a lot of people's conclusions are, Peter Hyatt's and Mark Sonokanoko and a few others, is that she died in the apartment by accident. I think at that point she must have been alone, because well, we'll never know, but that's just a theory. I believe now that you're correct. I think they probably have left that unlocked, but closed the rear patio door.
Well, if somebody was in there, it wouldn't have mattered. And let's not forget that Paulo Rebello, although not in the files, but it is pretty much known that he did say that there were only 7 children in one apartment, and Clarence responded to that. So they would have had to have said that, even though it's not in the files, they would have had to have said that for Clarence to respond to it. And that's why I believe that is the case, that they had 7 children in one apartment.
Can I ask a question there? If that's the case, how did Madeleine die by accident in the apartment if there was somebody there and there were several children there?
We don't know what happened to Maddie. We can't presume anything.
The theory of Madeleine dying in the apartment.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Gonzalo Amaral's theory is that she fell from the couch, and that would account for blood behind the sofa. Jerry claiming, preempting actually, by saying, "Oh yes, she had a nosebleed." And with the dog's evidence, if you've noticed, they really only follow through on what was in the car, because as far as the apartment goes, it could be 100% Maddie's blood, but that isn't proof of anything, because she actually was supposed to have been in the apartment. So that's why you won't really hear anything other than the 15 out of 19 of Maddie's alleles in the car. Now, I need to point out something which took me a little while to figure out, and most people know, but just to be on the safe side that you do understand, is 15 of Maddie's 19 alleles were in a blood forensics, whatever. Sample, that's the word. Thank you. And it was out of 37. So it wasn't that 15 of her 19 alleles were there. So it's probably 1,000,000,000 to 1 that it was Maddie. There was 15 of her alleles in with a total of 37. So there were at least 2-3 other people's That's the word. I thank you. Do you know what's really funny? I had a couple of little strokes a few years ago, and just little mini strokes. And I was not going to do lives because I thought, I'm going to get really stuck with words. And I usually try and go around the bush with them. But I actually decided to do this Maddie broadcasts because there was one chap that really believed in me, and he was sadly in his last stages of cancer, and it's because of him that I actually started doing these lives. And I thought, blow it, if I can't remember a word, then I'll just have to fake it. So you're really helping me there, Kenny. And rest in peace, Chris. I always dedicate every Maddie life to Chris, because without him I wouldn't. He supported me. It was one of the few things he wanted to do in his last time, and I really took that and decided that's it. So
I'll just add, you're doing a fantastic job, Lizzie. So there's I can vouch for everybody who's listening and all the previous work you've done on the Maddie podcast and all your videos. It's a fantastic piece of work that you've done, and you're an expert in the field. And thankfully, because of you, a lot of people, including the fantastic award-winning Maddie podcast, which in most part was due to the expert information and input that you contributed. So
I have to interrupt there.
Sorry.
Myself and my admin, and that is Cherry and Carrie, who's in chat, and also Helen and Linda, the admin of HiDeHo Controversy of Madeleine McCann, but also Ben Salmon, who passed away, sadly. Rest in peace, Ben. He was just fantastic on the phone issues. And Isabel, do you know, I was nearly going to say Isabel Duarte. Isabel McFadden, and she is absolutely fantastic too. And there's others that didn't have their name. So we had input. It wasn't all of us, but he did such a great job. I mean, you could not. I mean, he even ended up getting Gonzalo Amaral on one of the last broadcasts, because Gonzalo doesn't agree to anything, but he saw that Mark was so good that he agreed. He was good. But thank you for that, Kenny. I appreciate that. And yeah, I know. I've been doing it for 16 years. I did a lot of deep research. This was before the Facebook groups, so we only had the forums at that time, and I studied the timelines really deeply. And it's not that I ever want. I think I was telling Jane the other day, it's not that I ever want accolades for it. What I do want is for people to recognize my credibility in what I'm talking about, basically. I don't want all that other stuff. I just want people to know that I do understand and believe what I'm saying. And I stand by it. In all the videos I've done, I think overall I did about 400. I stand by every single one. And there's only a few mistakes that I actually feel I made. So that's all I want people to know, is that they hopefully can trust me, but never blindly believe me. Always, always, always check for yourself. Whoops. So
what brought you to the Madeleine McCann mystery? And what you asked me earlier on, what my interest and intrigue was. What initially brought you to the Madeleine McCann mystery and made you do all the research and this, etc.
I was running an expat group back in 2005, 6, 7, whatever, and I was occasionally asked about, they discuss about Maddie when it happened. We didn't really hear about it here in Canada. But the others would ask about it, and then I still have my actual post where somebody had asked me something, and I'd said I didn't have video ability on my computer. It was a really bad one. And I asked if Kate actually had tears. That was my first question. And somebody said, no, she was crying, but we saw no tears. And I said, okay, well, I'm not going to answer anything because I can't answer something without getting the actual facts myself. So I'm going to go and check it out and see what I think. Oops.
What year was that? Lizzie?
2007. So there was, this is what happened. I'm still checking. 16 years later, I'm still checking. But that was what it was. Because I cannot answer, I will not answer to something that I'm not fully aware of or I've got the information on. So I still have that message. Yeah, I'm just going to check.
I know when you spoke to me, you insisted on obviously sticking to the facts, which you believe you've done throughout your research.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I'm absolutely. It's the biggest thing to me, and Cherry and Carrie still look after HDH because I don't have a lot of time, and it's anything you want to know. Either Cherry or Carrie can come up with the answer to and the links, and they're all based on facts. We don't allow speculation, and I certainly make no money from Maddie. We've had others who will give you stories about, oh yeah, here's one. Right, Jane, I've got your back here. I know you've been trying. Is that it's said that there was blood under the tiles. This really, for Mike, sure, and myself, this really gets to us because Armchair Detective actually claims every single time. To this day, it's part of his parrot fashion knowledge of Maddie, is that there was blood found under the tiles. Now, initially, that's what I'd believed. But I soon found out that when the files were released, that the blood under the tiles in the apartment is that of the officer who lifted the tiles on the 4th, August the 4th. A lot of people don't realize that the dogs went back after. We've only seen when the dogs alerted on that day that they went, which I think may have been the 2nd, I'm not sure. But on the 4th, the dogs went back. They've got all the videos. We haven't seen it. And the chap that the officer that picked up the tiles, he cut himself, and that's the blood that's underneath the tiles. Another thing that they discovered was that Eddie alerted to cadaver odor outside the veranda door. Pardon? Yeah. Did you say something, Kenny?
No, sorry. I've just dropped my glasses.
Oh,
but can I just interrupt you there?
Yes.
Just to answer the question about any mistakes that could be wrongly interpreted there. The dogs must have alerted before the police officer lifted the tile to cut himself to put his blood underneath the tile. So the dog alerted prior to, if you're looking at chronological order, if the dog comes in and barks or stands still and points to blood being around those tiles, then the officer in question, whose blood was found under the tiles, that blood couldn't have been there whilst the dog was pointing to the tile because it hadn't been lifted. So there was blood to save any doubt of all the blood was the detectives that was round about those tiles. that's untrue, because the dog's alerted, then the detectives come in. So the dog couldn't have alerted to the detective's blood prior to him coming into the apartment.
Yeah, so that, you're right. And also, all of Madeleine's components of her DNA were found within the blood samples that were found. But as I say, they can't, Maddie was there. And as Jerry tried to preempt, she had a nosebleed. So the fact that they found her blood in that apartment really is not anything that they could use as, real evidence of anything.
But wouldn't you think that would Jerry would say, because he hasn't really come out and said she definitely had a nosebleed.
He did mention it, I think, when he was looking at the dog's video. At one point, that's they were both shown the dog's video. Kate's comments were, I believe that might have been when she called them names. But Jerry did mention about the blood, the nosebleed. Yeah, I do have I'm getting a little bit mixed up here, but yeah, he did mention about a nosebleed, because I remember saying to Heather, hi Heather, if you're listening, or if you're going to listen later, I remember having a discussion about with Heather about the blood, that we weren't told it was blood. This is the thing. At this point, we were never told it was blood. But the fact is that the dogs came in and only alerted to blood. That's the only way. In the files, it doesn't say blood. But that's when I remember talking to Heather and saying, well, he knows there's blood there. He knows it's blood, because he's mentioned about nosebleed. So he was preempting the fact that there was blood on those tiles.
Can I just ask you a question there? Or state an observation? Now, there's a very famous video where where Sandra, the Portuguese journalist, asks Jerry, what do you think of the dog's findings? Now, if I was a parent of a missing child, one, I wouldn't smirk. Two, I would be concerned. And three, if my daughter had a nosebleed, then I would say, well, that's quite easily answered, because my daughter's had a nosebleed and it's probably off the nosebleed. His reply was, well, ask the dogs, Sandra. So at that point, why didn't he answer, it's quite simple, Madeleine's had a nosebleed and it's gone onto the floor and the dogs have detected. Well, how she's had a nosebleed under the sofa is another mystery, or behind the sofa, but why didn't he answer the question there and then, instead of a laugh and smirk and say the dogs are extremely unreliable, ask the dogs, Sandra?
Yeah, there's some things which as we were going through it, because I specifically remember at the point that I spoke to Heather about the fact he'd mentioned a nosebleed, I remember saying to her, that proves that it was blood behind in the apartment, because we weren't told that it was blood at this point. And so we kind of forget sometimes the timeline of things. It's really difficult to remember specifically. It's almost one thing I always remember, that I haven't seen anybody mention it, but I do recall that it was many months or a long time before we actually realized what David Payne looked like. It's I know that there was the videos of him getting into the car, but they didn't they took a while before they actually allowed photos of David Payne. I remember thinking that, why aren't we seeing him? And that always made me wonder, but that's another story, right?
And what was the relevance of that? What do you think the relevance of that is?
At the time, we thought the possibility, especially as he was questionable Well, we know the Gasper statements when he was trying to pull Kate away from the social worker that was there the following morning, and she recognized him. You know, a few issues. And as Gonzalo has done some videos and called him the mystery man, the enigma. You know, there's more to that. I often prefer not to get deep into that, but I think we should start answering a few more questions.
Yeah.
Let me see. Okay. I'd love to know. Oh, I don't know who actually answered that. I'm sorry about that. I'd love to know if they know what was in the deleted messages. Is that something Gonzalo is holding back for a later date? We have just recently come across that. Isabel McFadden had released the details that the text messages were actually legal counsel. The text messages that she claims after the 4th, but he actually did start receiving those text messages on the Wednesday. So that would have been May the 2nd. And they've denied them. It's the Portuguese prosecutor. They know, they knew what was in those messages. So they know that Jerry was in contact with legal counsel. And before the shelving in May, they appealed to Supreme Court or the equivalent. And Judge Cardoso denied them being able to make them public for whatever reason. But they must have been really, really important, which since I've spoken to Isabel, it seems that it was legal counsel. And they wanted to get that out before the shelving, but they weren't allowed to. So, yes. So is that question answered okay, do you think?
When Jerry says leave no stone unturned, why would you think he would, that Kate and Jerry and the family wouldn't disclose the content of the text messages?
Because he was phoning his legal counsel. Why would he be doing that on the Wednesday if nothing happened to Maddie till the Thursday?
And why would you not want to make them public if you leave no stone unturned?
Well, the judge decided that, you know, I guess if the judge was under the impression that nothing happened to Maddie till Thursday, then he would have denied those messages because it wasn't anything to do with Maddie's disappearance. I think that's probably the reason why.
I can understand that, but again, it leaves questions unanswered to the general public who don't believe Kate and Jerry. So when you say he says leave no stone unturned and not answering questions, then people, and you wonder why people get intrigued by the mystery, because then people say, well, why aren't you disclosing? If it's such a simple irrelevance, then why not make it public?
Yeah, but obviously it wasn't something they ever wanted anybody to find out.
Exactly.
It also serves to support that something did happen to Maddie earlier in the week.
Getting back to the early discussion, yeah.
Whether those text messages were just text messages denied, or whether they, as we believe now, were actual calls to legal counsel, it really does tell you that if the police were curious about them and found them important enough to take to Supreme Court, then surely that would tell them that, hang on, something happened to Maddie earlier in the week. Now, Gonzalo does, thanks to Peter Mack, does believe that it's possible now that something happened to Maddie earlier in the week, and this is what I'm working on, as you know.
And were these text messages denied originally?
Oh yeah, both of them have denied. Actually, Jerry is very clever at how he denies. I know somebody else who does similar. I think there was 14 messages. I can't be sure on this, but I think there was 14. And Jerry says, we never received 16 text messages. You know, he's very clever. He's telling the truth.
Yeah,
because it was only 14. You know what I mean? I've caught him out doing a few things, a few times doing stuff like that. Oh, yeah, one was him denying the dream.
Yeah, Kate never had it.
I think he stood outside the courthouse and said Kate didn't have a dream that Maddie was buried on a hill. And again, absolutely right. She didn't have a dream she was buried. She had a dream she was laying on a hill. So he kind of tells the truth as such, and he's very cunning. Very cunning.
Just a pointer on that when he interview where he came out of the court. He also says something must have been lost in translation with the liaison officer. Now, what I find amusing is the liaison officer between Kate, the McCanns, and the Portuguese police can speak fluent English and fluent Portuguese. So he's now saying that the police officer, who was a liaison officer, lost something in translation when he can speak both languages. So how can it be lost in translation?
Yeah. Well, see, there was an effort to discredit Ricardo Pava, and it was pretty sad. So I don't know where it all came from, but they did make an effort. Somebody made an effort to discredit him, and he did have to leave. And that was pretty sad.
Yeah.
So, okay, let me...
Any more questions?
Along here. Okay, hopefully I've answered that one about the text. I mean, we can still, go over stuff. I just want to make sure that we go through the ones that people took the time to comment on. Okay, Mary Elizabeth Davis. If it had been me, e.g., leaving my kids here in the UK, social services would have been on me like a ton of bricks. What gets me is 2 doctors, all those wages, and they didn't want a nanny, and that was supplied by the complex. I personally would have paid and taken a childminder with me. Well worth it. Peace of mind. I pray she's not alive, rather than the thought of the poor girl being passed around a sex trafficking ring. This is what the worry is when children go missing. Well, we know from the cadaver dogs that Maddie died, and the Portuguese police Tavares report says Maddie died in the apartment. The parents hid her body, and then they simulated an abduction. So we know that. But I think this is again another example of where having something happen earlier in the week, you can explain that if something happened to Maddie earlier in the week, let's say before Tuesday, which is what I believe. I know that Peter believes it may have been Monday or Sunday. I'm not sure. Peter Mack and also Tony Bennett. If that's the case, it kind of answers all those questions because they didn't leave her. There was no neglect. They weren't being left. And that would only be because something had happened earlier in the week. So, and that's why they didn't get anybody in, because she was not around. They didn't get the babysitters in to watch them because Maddie wasn't around.
Yeah.
You know, that answers all those questions. Like I say, the earlier something happened to Maddie earlier answers so many of the questions that people ask. So,
well, that question there is a typical example of what frustrated you earlier in the in this conversation. That's a typical example of
yeah,
somebody highlighting the neglect on the evening of the abduction when there was nobody there.
Yeah.
To neglect it never happened. People
But
use the timeline and whatever for that evening when it was a complete simulation. So you
come away away from that thinking, yeah, they left those kids alone.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean?
Yeah.
Oh, subconsciously it's allowing for an abduction, and you're not thinking it yourself, but basically it's the scenario for an abduction.
It deflects everything away from the simulated abduction.
Yeah. I think depending on what people are interested in. Now, I've noticed I usually do the Maddie lives, or I used to do them at 3:00, and I've noticed even Carrie had to leave because this is a little bit earlier in the day and people are either having their supper or whatever. So hopefully there's some of you are listening to this later. And if you are, if you're listening to this, I've remembered you. I know you're busy. You're out in Portugal there.
What's the ideal time for your life stuff, Lizzie?
Well, it's not so much that there's an ideal time, but I was doing it at 3:00 my time on every Saturday. We used to do that every Saturday, and then I ran into issues where I was looking after somebody and it was impossible for me to be able to do it. And then I've had computer issues and you name it. So I've been kind of random lately. So there's it's really it doesn't matter as long as I get it out there and hopefully people watch it at some point and can get something from it. That's really what it's about. I just feel bad for somebody like Carrie who wanted to help me, but she can't because it's, you know, the kiddie winks are not in bed yet. So, and Emily Cheatham, she's always around. Hi, Emily, and Roberta, and the twins slept through the noise. This is Roberta Armour. The twins slept through all the noise and moving them to another apartment. Very suspicious. Now, what I understand is that the cops actually did try to wake them. I have heard that from a reliable source, relatively reliable source. So yeah, if prior to setting up the abduction in that apartment, maybe the twins were somewhere else along with the others and had to be moved in. But I've always thought that when excuse me, when Russell O'Brien left and had to come back to his meal, and he came back at just before 10, I've always felt that he was fixing everything up in the apartment and trying to do the blinds maybe. And as soon as he got back, that was Kate's kind of time to go and do the abduction thing. It's you know, it's sad. Oh yeah, I better get through these questions, hadn't I? And I'm losing them because okay, we've done that one. And we've done that one. Let's see if we've got... and look at this. I've got little thingies, tags over the actual name. Do you have a tag over the name for this person? My question is, what would make the McCanns skip breakfast that was included in the holiday price? They had access to a buggy. None of the other members who also had children complained it was too far to walk. Is it possible that if the children were given something to make them sleep, that it took longer for them to wake in the mornings? Now, here is an absolute other question that is a question under normal circumstances, but when you look to the fact that something happened, maybe something happened to Maddie earlier, then it falls into place and it answers the question. Of course, they couldn't go to breakfast because they didn't have Maddie available to go with them. It's
good point.
Yeah, this happens so much that I see with questions that it does answer all the questions, basically. I've never, and this is the amazing thing, I've been promoting Something Happened Earlier since 2008. And it's because the files told me that. You know, when I looked at discrepancies starting on Tuesday morning, why would there be discrepancies, major discrepancies? And I have never in that, I guess that was, let's say 2008. So 15 years, I have never had any contradictions about my thoughts. There's nothing ever come across that I've considered to be a contradiction. There's one, well, I say never. There was one tiny little issue with Mrs. Fenn, but that's neither here nor there, in the fact that the whole of the scenario that something happened earlier has never been contradicted by anything. There's nothing that contradicts it. And just recently, as you may know, I always felt that if I was going to claim that something happened earlier, then it's really my responsibility to explain how they managed to achieve the crash, deceit.
Yeah.
And I explained it, and it fell into place. It was so simple. There was no substitute child. It was just because it really wasn't a crash that was like a nursery where everybody's marked in and out. The children just came and went.
It was more like a play group.
Yeah, excuse me. And so it would be easy to go there with Russell. Let's say it's just Jerry and Russell's daughter. Go there with Russell. One of them signs, because there was one child came in and one child came out. That's whatever. But one of them signs, and in walks Russell's daughter, and in walks Jerry. Okay, the following week, the nannies are saying, yeah, we saw Jerry. He came in. We saw him at the nursery. He was there with Maddie. We saw Maddie there.
Especially if he makes a fuss about, hello, how are we doing, girls? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and I think he would. Yeah. Meanwhile, Russell's daughter has gone off somewhere, and, they, in their mind, think they've seen Maddie. It's not about being a substitute. It's just about the cunningness of how they figured that out. Because think about it. So, if something happened to Maddie before Tuesday, they'd have to explain. So I think that Jerry thought, you know what, Russell, your daughter looks similar to mine, to Maddie. So if we both, and it shows in the crash files, they, for the most part, they arrived at the same time, and, but in the files, one child is signed in, but the other child is signed out. I could never understand this, one child in, one child out, until it clicked that they would arrive. Jerry would walk in with Russell's daughter, chat to the nannies, whatever. And the following week, when it came to doing the interviews, the nannies, they were never specific. I didn't find any specific. Oh yes, it was Madeleine because this. It was, yeah, we saw Jerry, saw, Maddie for a bit when he came in or whatever. So I mean, that was easy to get away with, totally easy. Because children were coming in sometimes and children were leaving, they were picked up. And this also answers why were the children left at the creche all day? From what I understand, the Russell O'Brien didn't want his daughter. They initially didn't want to send her there all day because you only got half a day. You had to pay for the extra half a day. But and maybe none of them were planning on keeping them there in the afternoon. But if Maddie wasn't there, they kind of had to work this out.
Is there any significance to the signature of Kate Healy as opposed to Kate McCann in the creche records?
I really don't know on that. I know that it said that doctors still go under their old name. I really don't know. I really don't know. I can't answer that question, Kenny.
Because it only happened the once. I think she signed Kate Healy, and might be a red flag. I know a red herring to take people off the scent, or what, you don't know. Don't know what.
I know they were looking. They were looking at all the discrepancies with the creche records. I put them all into a compact little thing. This is when I discovered that, hang on here, Jerry and Russell were going at the same time. Why was that? Even though. And the one thing that really got me, that almost confirmed to me, was when it was raining, Jerry, let's just say Jerry and Russell, it could have been Jerry and Kate, whatever, but Jerry dropped the twins off, and normally would go and drop Maddie off 10 minutes away, but it took him 20 minutes. And I thought, why did it take so long? And then I remembered that Diane Webster had said that she remembers seeing Jerry and Kate at breakfast at the Millennium, although she didn't say they had breakfast. And as I've mentioned before, if Maddie wasn't around, of course, they wouldn't be going to breakfast. That's why they chose not to go to breakfast every morning. But she saw them there that morning. And that's when, because there was no tennis, Jerry dropped off the twins and maybe walked over to the Millennium to pick up with Russell, and they both arrived at the kids club at exactly the same time. Now, isn't that odd that they're in two different places and yet they both arrived at exactly the same time? And that's why I believe that specifically that he walked over to get Russell, and had I not remembered that Diane had said that,
a light bulb moment.
It wouldn't show up in any of the police computer things. It was just that one little instance that fell into place for me and confirmed to a degree. So, yeah, I'm really quite proud of the creche deceit research.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Okay. We're getting... okay. Oh, okay, Bella. I don't know if Bella's here. I had to laugh at this. Can Lizzie explain the LCN DNA, please? I've been told LCN is not accepted in Portuguese forensics. Well, Bella, I'm not so sure that I'm a great one to ask about low copy number, DNA, and stuff like that. I only know the bare basics of DNA. And I think low copy number is when they only have a small amount of something, and a small amount of DNA, and they have to amplify it. And by amplifying it, then it gets questionable, whatever. I don't know if that's the question, or whether you're asking if it's just allowable in Portugal. but I'm not quite sure the reasoning behind that. Why would that, we know the forensics were done in Birmingham, in FSS, Forensic Science Services, but also a lot of the forensics were sent to Portugal as well. So maybe that's why you're asking. In fact, when I was mentioning about the dogs going back to the apartment on the 4th of August, when the tile was lifted, Eddie discovered cadaver odor by the veranda doors, and there were hairs. And those hairs were sent to Portugal, not to Birmingham. And I searched and searched. There is nothing of the result. But what we do know is that Portugal had those hairs. And any questionable thing that was happening with FSS, Portugal knows and has those hairs. And Gonzalo has referred to the hairs that they have. So it could be. I don't know if anybody remembers Beachy. She was an ex-cop, and she was really involved in the DNA and everything. And I remember she was one of her biggest issues was the fact that that there was nothing that they could get a result from as to whether the hair meant that the person was dead or not. I can't remember the exact wording for that, but yeah. But if the Portuguese police have hairs that were found on the veranda, they may know whose hair that was and whether or not that person was dead at the time. That's major. That's major. But it's not enough to make a charge. And the thing is that whatever happened to Maddie, I don't know when or how or why or what. I don't know any of that because it's not part of the files. But if you follow the sequence, the blood, the cadaver behind the sofa, then into the room. Now, it's not necessarily off the shelf because apparently cadaver odor kind of dissipates and goes into corners and things. So whatever. But then to find the cadaver odor out on the veranda, and it took me quite some time to discover those windows in their bedroom were actually doors. And I confirmed that they were doors. And then it's also found in the garden below. A small amount of just a light cadaver scent was found in the floor below. Now, if something happened earlier, this was probably what happened, that she was moved into the bedroom, onto the veranda, down into the garden, and taken off to wherever.
Can I say something there?
Pardon?
If that was the case, Lizzie, if it was detected at the exit of the patio doors, and then down towards the flower bed in the garden, and then that leads out to the gate where Jerry was stopped to talk to Jez Wilkins on the night of the Jane Tanner, on the night of the disappearance, on the night that Jane Tanner had a sighting at the time. Could it be that that Maddie was being moved then, and he was stopped and the body was laid in the flower bed prior to being disposed of, and it was Jez that stopped Jerry in his tracks?
I am waiting for somebody to explain to me how Jerry could get back to the apartment at I think it was 9:05 or something, and by 10 o'clock everybody knows about it, everybody's grieved, everybody no, I just have never ever believed that all of this could have happened within the 45 minutes, an hour. And then when you say to yourself, okay, it couldn't happen, but So if that's the case, why didn't they wait till the next day to do it? And then you think, okay, that's probably what they did do. You wouldn't have to rush it. There was no need to rush it, to be ready and done and alerted at 10 o'clock. There wasn't any need for it. If he didn't find her till 9:15 or whenever, there was no need to say, oh, okay, we've got to get this all done by 10.
What a good point that is.
You know, they might just as well have done it the day before or the day before that. And so, you know, so now I know that Pat Brown and I, we're friends, we get on, we both respect each other's opinion, and she's a professional and I'm just me. But I'm a researcher and she's a profiler. So it's a little bit different. And she believes that it absolutely did. And she's got, you know, so it's up to you, up to anybody who does believe that it all happened on the Thursday, then absolutely check out Pat's. She's great. She really is. I'm just telling you my thoughts.
Can I give my thoughts on that?
Yeah.
I'm of the belief,
Yeah.
I'm of the belief that it happened earlier, as you suggested, but I'm of the belief that the body was disposed of that evening around the time that Jez stopped Jerry at the gate at the rear patio door. I think he was going to dispose of the body then, because yes, it did happen earlier, and then they were in panic mode. Then they had to plan exactly how to simulate the abduction, and then that happened on the evening of the disappearance on the 3rd of May. But I believe they couldn't dispose of the body earlier, because if it was found and they were out at dinner and it's daytime, it'd have had to been on an evening. You've got the light of day. There's people about. You can't dispose of a body. It had to be during the darker hours. And if the body was found prior to that, and they hadn't alerted or simulated the abduction, then they were caught red-handed. So they had to dispose of the body that evening, then raise the alarm, because if they'd done it earlier and they were in the swimming pool for argument's sake during the day and the body was found, then they're going to say, well, how didn't you realise that your daughter was missing? So my theory is, yes, I agree with you that it happened earlier.
When you say earlier, how do you mean earlier?
Well, before the 3rd, a day or two before the 3rd. I've never thought of a day when it happened. Never went that deep. I just know that it didn't. In my opinion, it didn't happen on that night. She didn't die on that night. She died early.
And I'm going to have to re-listen to this, to your explanation of this, because I can't get my head around that. Doesn't mean you're wrong. I'm just trying in my brain to work that out. So you'll have to help me on that one.
Well,
that.
I'll ask this question: when do you think that they disposed of Maddie? Did you think they disposed of Maddie earlier and then raised the alarm on the 3rd, or do you believe that they disposed of Maddie on the evening around about 9 o'clock on the 3rd and then raised the alarm at 10?
I would say, in my opinion, without question, they would have had it all done and sorted before the 3rd, because they were nobody. When you say you can't move a body during the day, of course they could. They had the blue bag. They were nobody. They were just other people around. Nobody is going to be alerted to what they were doing or anything. So
right. I've never thought that because of the Jane Tanner sighting and the Jez Wilkins incident.
I've always
thought that was the moment when he got interrupted on leaving with the body.
Mm.
But I might be wrong. I've never thought of. It's never entered my head that disposed of the body earlier, and then just because of the Jez Wilkins. That's the Jez Wilkins Jane Tanner sighting, which all happened at the same time. And why would Jerry say he was over the other side of the road?
I think that was. I think that was because he was planning on the fact that he was stood out there, and that somebody couldn't get in or out of the apartment if he was right close to it. That whatever. But I just want to say that Gonzalo has discounted any sighting whatsoever of Jane Tanner, because apparently she didn't walk to that area, and Jez Wilkins didn't see her either, so that kind of fits. But also Jez Wilkins has stated he doesn't know the time that he met up with Jerry. It could have been 8:45, 8:45, 8:45. He doesn't know the time. And I tried to work it out with any comments about sunset or things like that. But no, he doesn't say that he met up with Jerry at 9:15 or whatever time he said. He said it could have been 15 minutes before 9.
Why would Jane positively put Jez Wilkins outside the gate?
Well, this is how they worked out the or what they were left with. You've actually come up with something which you'd have to understand that they wouldn't have known about him. But he may have been passed earlier. Yeah, it's you really have to kind of think your way through that, because he would have been a surprise to them regardless. But then he didn't see Jane, so.
And why the mix-up with the shutters? Why didn't they pre-plan that? Why wasn't that better planned if they'd had plenty of time?
Well, they didn't realise maybe that you couldn't break into those shutters. They probably didn't realise it. And if Russell did go back to check on and try and do the shutters, he came back and maybe didn't have time to tell Kate, I couldn't fix the shutters. I couldn't work the shutters. So, it was, I don't know, mistakes of that kind. But I can see we're getting on here, and I think I want to answer at least those questions that we have. No, we've done that one. Mark Perlin, is the expert. He offered his services. Can you explain what a coincidence it was? All those medical folk with their predominantly young kids were doing in enclosed Ocean Club that particular week. Yeah, I do hear that there was other doctors and that around, but I really couldn't state with any knowledge exactly why, or whether there was a convention of some sort, or I really don't know. I think do you have any idea on that, Kenny?
No, I haven't went that deep.
It is kind of
I just think it's a coincidence that there was doctors at the same time. I think it's just a coincidence that the doctors were staying at the Ocean Club at the same time that several other doctors were staying there. I think it's just a coincidence, and people have picked up on it and think and looked too deep into that.
Yeah, I've seen it. I kind of focused on timelines mostly, so I really do apologize that although I know a lot about all the peripheral stuff, I'm not fully clued up on all of that. Jerry said, now, Minnie Susan. Jerry said he touched the shutters, and yet only Kate's fingerprints were on them. Did anyone ask him why his fingerprints wasn't on them shutters? Well, Kate didn't actually touch the shutters. She touched the window, and the window was from the inside that she touched it. And the shutters were not gemmed. So Jerry's fingerprints weren't on them. He didn't claim to have done anything. I think the others say they checked them, but
I know
can't.
on one of Kate's interviews, she says that the shutters hadn't been touched all week and the window hadn't been opened all week.
Yeah, and yet her fingerprints were on the window opening up. If I'm not mistaken, the dog smelled blood even in close proximity to the apartment above the McCanns, but didn't sniff inside. It was an apartment that had been uninhabited for a long time. What if the little girl was also hidden in this apartment for some time, and why didn't anybody deal with it? I don't remember where I read it or heard it, so I apologize if it's not true. Well, it actually is true, I believe. The apartment was the one opposite Mrs. Fenn's. I do have a picture of the door somewhere. And there was an issue that there was a fridge in there that had stuff in it. I don't know. I don't recall the details of how it was described that the dogs did alert, but they only alert to. It may have been the other dogs. That may be it. That it wasn't the cadaver dogs that were brought in August, that it was the other dogs that were searching for Maddie that night. That's probably what it was, if memory serves. They did smell something, which they wouldn't be blood dogs. They would have smelt something maybe through, and there was a fridge there that did have something in it. But I don't think anything came of it. I don't believe there was anything questionable about that. Do you recall that, Kenny?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't.
Yeah. So I think the dogs were the ones that were searching for her.
The GNR, I think it's the GNR dogs. The GNR dogs, yeah. They were there, but it wasn't until after Kate's dream that the Met Police dogs were brought in, which was
that was in
August, early August.
Oh, I think I'm getting there. Because after people have taken the time and trouble to write a question, it's up to me to be respectful and read it out. Not all the files were released. How much is still not released? And do you know what the retained files contain? Also regarding the retained files, will they ever be released? Well, I have been assured. I have been assured that they released all of the files except the pedophile stuff. Now, we do know that there are some files that are referred to, like the interview with David Payne is referred to, that's not in the files. Carpenter, one of those interviews with his wife, and a list of other stuff is referred to, but not in the files. So I'm sure there is also a lot of other stuff that is not referred to, that is not in the files. And it would probably likely be the important stuff, the important comments, issues. I can't explain why I was assured that without question everything was released. But there was one issue, is that when it was released, the journalists got a different, it was released on DVD, and they got a lot more information than we actually got in as the public. So and I have been able to contact somebody who's got the original CD, and she was able to send me some stuff which wasn't in the files itself, that we've got on Pamela's blog, Maddie McCann PJ Files. Thanks to Pamela for hosting those. I think every now and again she has to pay for that a forum that she hosts on, and every now and again it's always helpful to her to give her a little bit of a help with the payments.
Just a question. Will the Operation Grange files and information ever be disclosed?
Well, that I don't know. I really don't know.
I think the freedom of information. A lot of people mention that the reason why it's kept open with a small budget now is because it'll then be a live case, and the information, freedom of information, can't be disclosed. Do you have you got any?
Yeah, I'm afraid I can't answer that. I mean, obviously, I'd love it, and we do know that the Leicester police held back on the gas bar statements. I mean, we just don't know what the British police have. We really don't.
And again, just a little bit more information on the EFIT from the Smith sighting was collected by the private detectives hired by the McCanns and sent over to Ireland, and a report by the private investigators didn't go down well with the McCanns, and that was withheld for 5 years. What's your thoughts on that, Lizzie?
I'm going to pass on that. As I mentioned, I kind of stuck to timelines and all the other issues that cropped up. I kind of knew about them, and I as I made clear in the very first post I ever did about Maddie, was I don't want to discuss anything that I really don't know about, because I can even make a surmise on something, and that might get taken as
the wrong way.
And so I try to be very careful if I don't actually have details. It's best if I don't comment on it.
Pat Brown mentions in her book about the Smith sighting being an independent witness that had no links to the McCanns and believes it to be true. I know your thoughts. What's your thoughts on the Smith sighting? Do you think it's relevant, or do you just think it's just a coincidence that somebody else was passing by, and it's a little bit of a red herring or an irrelevant sighting, or it's a fact? But so you can mention it. But
yeah,
I
absolutely believe that the Smiths saw somebody. They may have seen Jerry. It may have been a setup. It may have been because this was part of the abduction setup. They're thinking, okay, well, kind of, I'll go along there, and then they'll think that this, that, and the other. It could have been that. I absolutely do not believe for 1 second that Jerry or anybody would be carrying their dead daughter without any blanket, especially after there was blood found. In the open, no. I couldn't even comprehend carrying a dead child without wrapping them in a blanket or something at night. No, it just. But I do believe the Smiths. I don't believe they were making anything up. But either they were mistaken or it was Jerry and they had a plan, That's my thoughts on that.
Any more questions, Liz?
Yes, I'm just trying to. I got to get some new specs, and Shirley's not here. Shirley always helps me, and you can't see any. So I'm struggling.
I can see them actually. If you put them up, I'll try and expand them.
Hang on. Okay. Will the files ever be released? I don't know. Who knows? If there's a trial, if the police either have the smoking bullet and find Maddie's body, or know where Maddie's body is, They can't charge anybody right now because they don't even know the crime that they can charge them with. They don't know what happened to Maddie or where she is, so they can't charge anybody with anything because they don't know what crime it is. That's at least was in the files. I mean, I don't know if it's changed since. But Elspeth Anderson, I know there seems to be a higher entity which seems to be controlling what information the MSN releases and stopping people from talking. But does this not just cover the UK? Can't someone in, say, America or Australia take the case on board and do their own investigation where the government can't control them? Well, that's a very good question, Elspeth, and it's one that I actually did put forward to Mark Sauna-Kanoko. Now, he did the basic a study of the case as we know it, and he was open to my suggestion of a possibility that something happened earlier. But as he said, he had to stick with what they had and the basic. They couldn't go off course, especially because the lawyers were really intent on what they came up with. He was slightly open to it, and then I discovered that in Diane Webster's interview, she did mention the police that were interviewing her said something about you can't talk or something because of there's a super inaudible. It was on cassette, so it was inaudible.
I think it's called the super injunction.
Injunction. That's why I believe it was a super injunction. And Carter Ruck, the lawyers, are well known for using super injunctions. So, I mean, I think it stands to reason that they would have had it in this case. I don't know how long it lasts for, but a super injunction means that nobody can talk, and they can't even tell you why they can't talk. They can't say, oh, we can't tell you that because we're under a super injunction. They just can't mention anything. And that's why I believe the media are held under a super injunction, possibly, as well as everybody else. And so they can't even say, we can't tell you. Now, I did speak to Mark about this, and he did have an interest in it. And he is in Australia, and yes, he could actually do something about it. But sadly, I mean, his job, he's, I think, a producer of 9 News and a senior journalist, certainly. And his time frame is, is very, he's not got a lot of schedule there. I will actually run it past him now that Gonzalo has admitted that the possibility of something happened earlier. Between that and the super injunction, I think I may just see if there's any possibility that he can check into that, because it just covers UK. It doesn't cover Australia, and he would be able to at least see if something existed. Maybe I'm going to be on that. Mark, watch out! I'm after you again. He's great. Oh, what a great bloke. I mean, you know him from the podcast, and I mean, everybody used to love listening to him because they'd fall asleep, listening. He had a great voice. It's great chap. And he's such a nice man too. In fact, when somebody was saying things about me on Twitter, he popped into our messenger and says, Liz, are you okay? He was concerned about me because somebody on Twitter was making some silly comments about me. I mean, he really does care about people. He's a great bloke. And so I'm going to get after him again. Yeah, times have changed. Oh, Emily's still here. Was there anything? Do you know what? I haven't even been reading chat. See, I need Shirley. Shirley, where's Shirley? Can somebody else answer me in chat if there's any questions I've missed?
All right. 1 second.
Meanwhile, I'm going back to this one, which, okay, medical. Okay, I don't know why there was so many medical. Why did they order a takeout and stay with the babies? Because it really wasn't about a regular holiday. They were all together, and they would have been watching the children anyway, but then it was different once Maddie possibly disappeared, was not around. Their whole week would have changed. Why is there so much interference in this? Oh, I'd like to know what time the McCanns arrived at the Ocean Club, please. They arrived at, I did a video. I believe it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon that they arrived, and I believe and with the Paynes, and I believe Jane Tanner and the others came from Exeter, and they arrived, I think, around 11, something like that. So I have actually got a video which tells you all about the first day and what happened on the Saturday. And I sometimes hesitate to put it up because it's Cliff singing Summer Holiday, which some people are not happy about. But back then, I did it in 2011. What was I to know? Why is there so much, Carolyn Goodacre, why is there so much interference in this case? And why is Operation Grange only investigating an abduction when there's no evidence to prove an abduction took place? Yes, you're right. There's no evidence to show there was an abduction, and Operation Grange may be doing anything. We don't know anything about what Operation Grange are doing. And as I mentioned earlier, it's very possible that they have checked out the fund and they know a lot more, but they are not telling us one little thing. They are holding back on everything. So it could be that there's a big cover up and they're getting money for nothing and all this. Could be. On the other hand, it could be that they, for real, know everything. Have got everything in place. Same as with the Portuguese police. They've got everything in place, but they can't charge anybody until somebody confesses or they find the body. Basically, that has been mentioned. They just need that proof. I mean, you've only got to be somebody who watched the OJ trial to know that there was like over 300 incidences of blood splatter, that different blood things, and he still got away with it.
I watched that case live, actually. It was late on.
Yeah, me too.
I remember that well.
I've got it on VHS. I know. The only part I didn't record was the DNA. But I recorded right through. I've got cases of DNA, OJs. You know,
it's funny because I often refer to the OJ Simpson case when in reference to the Madeleine McCann case, when they say that the Portuguese police were buffoons and they hadn't cordoned off the crime scene and had contaminated the apartment with whatever. And O.J. Simpson claimed when they took all the blood samples and the guy was on the roadside and somebody took a photograph and he had his case open and the samples were obviously exposed to the roadside in the air. And they said it could have been the samples could have been contaminated. And I laughed to myself because I thought, but they couldn't have been contaminated with O.J. Simpson's blood, could they? Or DNA, you know. And when I look at the Madeleine McCann case, I think, well, somebody couldn't have got in the crime scene and fixed the shutters and contaminated wiped the footprints away and took all the DNA samples away.
Yeah, I know. So, and I mean, you've only got to look at that case to realize that you can have an abundance of evidence, but it doesn't give the proof because of one little mistake with the gloves. Well, it wasn't just that, but that was really I mean, it was an
Well, the
unbelievable
fact
case.
was as well, he was a wealthy man, and he got the top lawyers in to defend him.
Well, the McCanns are not absolutely wealthy, but they've certainly got some people.
You need a few
supporting
quid to get the UK's top defence lawyers in. You know,
yeah,
it's kind of
immediately,
looking
and
at trade.
also Clarence, who was head of the media monitoring unit, and he left his job to join them, not knowing if Maddie was going to be found the next day. But he obviously knew, otherwise he wouldn't have left his job. I mean, and then of course that puts into place that all of the information going across online would be picked up with keywords. You know, he was in charge of all that. But
See,
yeah,
when you put all this together, Liz, when you put all this together and you look at all the contradictions and the fact that Clarence Mitchell was brought on board, the fact that there's a super injunction, the fact that they set up a Madeleine McCann fund 10 days after she'd gone missing, and you add all of these up, and it doesn't look good. It doesn't paint a good picture of an abduction or the parents not being involved.
oh yeah. Just to say, it's not a fact there was super injunction. It's just my belief because of
Yeah. Well, alleged super.
I've got to make sure that people don't catch me on that.
These are only our opinions anyway in this podcast. So
yeah, but still,
clear
opinions really should be based on a fact.
On facts.
Now, it's. Oh, see, I forgot what I was going to say. I have forgotten. I was heading somewhere there, but I distracted myself. Let's just go to Jerry said he touched the shutters and yet only Kate's fingerprints were on the I did that. Did I do that?
You've answered
if
that.
I'm not mistaken, the dog smelled blood even in close proximity. Yeah, I did that one too, didn't I? I okay. So we've managed to do that. Just because I see it handy. For anybody who doesn't know, when we're talking about Russell's daughter maybe being mistaken accidentally for Maddie, but cunningly done by them for people to accidentally believe it was her. This is Jane Tanner's daughter. Look how similar hair color. She's 3 months younger, and therefore it would have been very easy. People don't realize how similar they looked. And even Jez Wilkins' daughter, she was in the same crash. She looks similar, right? It's so possible that another child was mistaken for Maddie. No substitute, no nothing, just mistake. So you can see how that happened. I'm just looking here for I can't see anything right now. So I wanted to kind of keep it within the 2 hours, but we've kind of gone over. Is there anything more that you wanted to add? Because we don't have to leave it at this today. We can come back and do. I do actually want to do one when we get some more information regarding the Huelva trip. I really want to focus on that and see what we can come up with.
Well, you can link that in with a timeline with a lot of things, can't you?
The triangle.
Yeah, the
followed
triangle.
by dogs, followed by Huelva, all within about a week. Yeah, approximately a week, all within that time. Was Maddie there? Was she transported in the truck or the van? And did she go there? You know, it's within a week. It's almost like this is the timeline that hit me just, you know, a week or so ago when I asked you and Jane if maybe we could do a bit of research on that, because we can't just claim it. We could be totally wrong. We might come across something that absolutely disputes the thought of that possibly happening. On the
What's
other
your
hand,
thoughts on the fact that Jerry sought legal representation or counsel prior to the disappearance of his daughter?
well, I don't know, but I could probably find out more information. Whether or not it could be made public, I don't know.
Because that's a massive
It is.
coup,
And that's why the Portuguese prosecutor took it to Supreme Court. But like I say, if the judge considered that Maddie was not taken until the following night, maybe that's why he refused it. Because it wasn't, if he believed she was abducted, he would find his text messages irrelevant.
Yeah.
And that's sad. But if it was realized that something happened earlier, and these text messages to a legal counsel may have been because he realized he was in deep trouble.
Do you think it'll ever be exposed? Do you think they could ever go back and ask for that information on those grounds?
Who knows? Who knows? We know nothing about all we know for the past 15 years since the files is nothing.
Yeah. Basically.
We have no idea what they've been doing over the past 15 years and what they know. But according to Gonzalo, he said that the reason that they haven't thought of the possibility of something happening earlier is because they can't explain the crash, that she was seen at the crash. And so I've got the actual interview with Hernani Cavallo, and I'd managed last time to get this into English. So you can see that he's saying, yeah, it's possible. Because Peter Mack, who, I don't know if Peter's still around, but he had convinced or explained to Gonzalo about the possibility of something happening earlier with his research, nothing to do with mine. This is the thing. We're all coming together and coming up with the same stuff with different research. But he had explained, and Gonzalo refers to him in this clip, that, yeah, something could have happened earlier, but how do we explain all the nannies basically seeing her in the crash? And this is why I've just discovered that. And this is why I thought the police would already know it. But then if Gonzalo doesn't know it, maybe the police don't. And that's why it's kind of important to follow up. Now, this is him. You'll see him claim it's possible that something happened earlier.
Mas eu tinha outra questão para lhe pôr, que era esta. Polícia bastante conhecido, formado, inglês, que se chama Peter, defende que a Madeleine McCann terá desaparecido a 29 de abril, ou seja, uma semana antes da data oficial do seu desaparecimento. Quer comentar?
É possível. Eu, neste novo livro, falo nessa hipótese, abordo essa hipótese. Não é só ele era superintendente da polícia britânica. São outras pessoas, advogados e outras pessoas, não é um bando de lunáticos. Eles pegaram em termos do estado do tempo daquela altura, com análise de satélite do estado do tempo, e dizem que aquela fotografia que os pais dizem que a família, o staff lá dos pais desta criança, dizem que foi efetuada no domingo na piscina, onde está o pai ao lado, que não é possível porque naquele dia o tempo não estava daquela forma. E portanto que para eles aquilo só aparece para provar ou tentar induzir em erro e dizer que a criança está viva naquela altura. Esta teoria tem algumas dificuldades de se comprovar, nomeadamente por causa do registro do infantário, nomeadamente aquele dia 3 mas depois já se vai saber mais tarde que há uma funcionária do infantário que será familiar, amiga de um familiar do padrinho ou da criança desaparecida.
Mas eu lembro-me da folha do registro do infantário estar rasurada.
Sim,
eu me lembro.
Aquelas assinaturas são meras rúbricas e facilmente são...
E a família Smith? A tal família que tem um avistamento?
Maybe that wasn't the right one. It went on for ages. But basically, he's saying there it's possible because of Peter explaining about the weather and that the last picture could have been taken on the Sunday, that something happened earlier. But as he said, how can it be explained about the creche, the nursery? And I have explained it. So who knows? I think it's pretty major. I would love to hear some input. I'm not saying that anything I've done is going to change the case or whatever. That's not the issue. But certainly, I hope that it can be recognized that it is a possibility. And, you know, so many times, like the neglect issue, it took a long time for people to recognize that. Then the earlier issue, it took a long time for people to recognize that. And the creche deceit, it's taken a while. I figured it out relatively recently. If you consider, I think it was 2019, 2017, maybe, which obviously is 10 years after the fact. But it was a light bulb moment when I suddenly realized it, that, that this is how they did it. I actually discovered it while I was posting on the forum. So I have my post. It's like, whoa, yeah. Yeah. So I'm really hoping that somebody could recognize it as being, that's for real.
Well, it's also relevant that the nannies at the creche could have made a mistake, which is what you're saying. What they say, that Jerry's made a mistake in his first statement. He says he got it wrong and he went through the rear patio door. How he made that mistake is open to debate as well, but it's quite possible.
It wasn't a mistake. I mean, he had to say what he had to say. There was no mistake. He knew what he was doing. He initially slid the door, but had to change it because otherwise, how could the abductor have got in? You know, that kind of stuff. So,
but his excuse is why he changed his statement is probably that he made a mistake. Oops, I'm sorry. I realise now that I've put the wrong door in, which is unbelievable. So, in the same breath, you can't then say that the nannies at the creche haven't made a similar mistake, which is more plausible in your theory.
Well, I'm going to show you something which you've probably seen, but it's the nanny statements. I took every statement. Here's a list of all the statements I could put together to see exactly if any of them showed to be a definite sighting of Maddie. Not one of these, I forgot, no, 29 witnesses, and just one was what I believe to be real. But let's just go to the nannies. And these are the nannies that, like I say, would have just glanced over, seen Jerry come in or seen him at some point. One brief moment, a few seconds, no direct contact, formal and short, no contact. Saw once, didn't know her. Possibly incorrect statement. Mistaken. Saw once. Formal and short, no direct contact. Is it possible they were mistaken? Now, I've also got one for, which is a lot more involved, for obviously for Catriona, and also for the cleaner and several others. They're much more involved. But I mean, when you look at, and I spoke to Isabel about this because she had actually spoken to the receptionist, Cecilia, who said that, yeah, she was in with her father, and I saw her and she was there hanging onto his leg. Well, isn't it weird that Maddie was so loud and everybody knew it was Maddie, and yet not only did Jane Tanner's daughter, Russell O'Brien's daughter, was she shy, but I don't know if you can see it on here, maybe not, but he does say she holds onto my leg. I mean, is this a coincidence?
Wow.
You know, and I mean, they wouldn't know. They're just another of a group. Yeah, I saw the father come in. She doesn't, you know, I know I wouldn't remember exactly what he looked like, you know, but if I saw his daughter, you know, and was told it was Maddie, oh yeah, I saw. Do you know what I mean? That we expect them to be so specific, but this was a nondescript week that we're asking them to remember.
Yeah.
And I can't always remember what I was doing yesterday, never mind who I saw last week and what they look like.
And bear in mind that the next week, these nannies have got another bunch of kids that they're supposed to identify. And the week after, they've got a different bunch of kids. And the week after that, they've got another bunch of kids.
Well, they were actually sent off to Greece, I think, by the following
Friday. What
Friday.
I'm saying is, week after week, they've got different kids.
Yeah.
You can identify, you know, it's just a blonde-haired, small blonde-haired child.
Even in an established nursery, and we have studied this, and also Carrie has mentioned it and others have mentioned it, that even with a nursery that takes in, puts everybody has arrived today and this is their names, but they still can't remember the names even after a week or so. They can't get the names correct. So how are they, you know, if Maddie did only arrive and go into the creche once or twice, Monday, Tuesday, Sunday, Monday, whatever, and then was missing, Catriona wouldn't notice. I really don't believe. I really. But anyway,
just a quick one, just to finish on that point, and it's a good point. Prior to that, if they've arrived on the Sunday and in midday, she wouldn't have been in the creche on the Sunday. So prior to that,
Saturday they arrived.
Saturday, sorry. Then it's only Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There's only 4 days where they've had to have got used to the sight of Madeleine.
But if she wasn't there, they wouldn't have got used to the sight of her.
Exactly.
There was 14 children.
Yeah.
I mean, not all the time, but 14 children were allocated to that room. It wasn't just Kat with, 4 children or 5 children or 3 or whatever. There was the 2 nannies who looked after it, the equivalent of 14 children if all the children showed up that I could find.
And am I right in saying that they invited that Katrina over to Leicester?
Yes. She was pushed off to Greece along with the other nannies the following Friday after it happened. And in November, they had a secret meeting in Rothley. A secret meeting that nobody knew about until afterwards. But during the course of that secret meeting, in the Rothley Hotel, I think it was, Catriona was invited and she was there. There's pictures of her with Kate and Jerry. And I don't believe Kat was involved in any way as such. I absolutely don't believe it. People used to accuse me of saying that. No, I think she was intimidated. And, even to the point that if she actually knew the picture of Maddie, that she hadn't seen her that day, how could she say, no, I didn't see her that day? she'd be so totally intimidated. But I don't believe she actually really knew. And when she went to Rothley, I see absolutely the possibility, because going by her statement, she never actually said from high tea on the Friday that she actually saw Maddie. She said that Kate was there with the twins. And she said Kate was wearing her tennis outfit, or jogging or whatever, and Jerry was at tennis. Now, apparently Jerry wasn't at tennis, but I was thinking about that, and I thought, you know, supposing during this meeting they said, oh yeah, do you remember at high tea that night, remember that I was jogging and I had on my jogging outfit, and yeah, Jerry was at tennis, and that happened, and you know, maybe this was what was put in her mind. The same as Diane Webster. I don't believe Diane knew anything about it, because one of the first things that happened was that they, the five of the lot of them were going to the restaurant, and Matthew Oldfield said he was going to go and chivvy up the Paynes. Now, one of them said he saw them outside the gate of McCann's apartment, one by the swimming pool, one up by the front of the building. They all had different, I've got a graphic on this, they all saw him at different places. Now, if they were all walking together, they all would have seen him at the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would have passed them at the same place.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's ultimately the police know everything as far as I'm concerned. They know what they did, you know, they know everything. We could discuss it till kingdom come, and it's not going to change anything. The police know. I think Scotland Yard knows, and we're just going to have to wait until we can discuss left, right, and centre, but it's not going to make a difference. Unless the question seat helps make a difference.
Well, unless if the Metropolitan Police in Scotland Yard or whatever are not willing to do anything, then all you can do is research the case and highlight the inconsistencies.
But they might already know.
I think they do.
When I was talking to those detectives, and that's why I played it, I spent a lot of years, 10 years before I actually released it. Or portions of it. It's because I wanted people to see that as I was talking to them, they were really nice, really good to me, and encouraging me. Why don't you send this? You know, do this. And he said, it's a murder team. That's why we get, you know, when I questioned about Jerry coming in through the front or the back, he said, yes, we check on that. That's why it's a murder team.
Wow.
You know, when he says that's why it's a murder team, I'll go out with that. I'll play that on the way out, because I think that's a good thing to finish with. He's acknowledging that Scotland Yard is a murder team. Now, at the time, that was how it was in 2013. Now, maybe higher echelons have come up and changed things. I don't know. I still believe in them. I still believe that they are doing the fund, because the Portuguese police can't do it, the search fund. And if they have knowledge that Maddie was actually not abducted, then they have the knowledge that that fund and everything else was a fraud. So anyway, I think we should end on that. We've been, oh golly, gosh, Kenny, we've been nearly 2
hours 40.
And so I want to thank. I'm so sorry that I being without Shirley. I'm not very good at reading the chat, and I get so wound up concentrating and focusing that I don't see the chat. That's why Shirley is so great, but she deserved a day off. So is Kerry. But thanks everybody for coming along and putting up with me.
Fantastic.
I will always, if you question me, if you come to me separately, if I haven't mentioned something that you wanted to know, either catch me in something in Jane and the others groups, what really happened to Madeleine McCann. That's private group. That's what inspired this live, and that's why Ken is with me. And if you need to know anything too, go to Cherry in HiDeHo Controversy of Madeleine McCann. We go back way back till 2012 was when I first opened that. And what else have we got?
Can I just say thank you for having me on the podcast, Lizzie? I've really enjoyed it.
I'm not sure if you could say thank you. No, it was lovely having you, Kenny. I really appreciate you jumped to it the same as you jumped to it when I was asking for somebody to help me research the whether her body was moved. Thank you so much, and you've been great. And I've loved having a secondary thought process happening on here. Yeah. You know, I might have missed Shirley for popping up the chat, but it's lovely to have a secondary thought process like yourself with somebody who's really familiar with the case. And I'm sure I saw somebody mention that they enjoyed listening to you. But you see, I'm hopeless and I can't tell you. But it was so, okay, well, thank you everybody for being here. Or future viewers, you know, if you're just listening after the fact, I appreciate you listening. And if Jose, who's visiting his sister in Portugal, has been listening, I didn't forget you. I promised you I'd give you a shout out, mention. And if you're not listening, it doesn't matter. I'll tell you off. And as always, I always have to remember Chris. Rest in peace, Chris, because without Chris, I wouldn't have been doing the lives, and I really mean that. So Chris is the one who inspired me basically to do all these. So that's it. So thanks ever so much, Kenny. And
until we meet again.
Yes. Bye, Emily. Bye, Revy. Bye.
I'll say bye-bye.
Everybody else.
Take care, everyone. Take care, everyone. I'll see you soon.
He can't see you.
Oh, well,
can't
you won't see me soon.
I'm getting some new specs, so I'll be able to. But that doesn't help my mind. I mean, I can't. It's not always just my specs that I can't read the chat. It's because I have to concentrate because I'm getting old, or I've got old. So anyway. Okie dokie. Thanks ever so much, St. Kenny. Thanks everybody for being here. Look after yourself. Enjoy your weekend. And we will meet again sometime. Don't know when. Don't know.
Take care.
Okay, I'm not gonna launch into that. I'll pass. Okay, now I'm gonna end it with, oh golly, I need to use the right mouse. I'm using a different mouse here. I've got one for my chat and one for the StreamYard. So I'm going to end it with that little conversation with the detective who claimed that Operation Grange was using a murder squad. If you still want to believe it's a cover-up, whatever, who knows? But this I like. Okay, night-night, everyone. Night-night, Curly. Kenny, Curly. Mr. Johnson, as somebody called you. Okay, we'll speak later. And thanks, everybody, for being here.
It's very easy to become very narrow-minded about this and sort of tunnel vision and all these sort of things. But, you know, we are looking at the whole picture and we're not just going down one particular line. Okay. Yep, no, feel free to send me anything you like and I'll I'll certainly look at it myself, and I'll feed it into our system.
Okay. So, see, that's what's important to us is because there's been such a cover-up, you know, and the lies, the literal lies. I mean, one in particular, if I can just say to you, is that Jerry McCann claims that he came in through a locked door that night in his statement, and yet I have a video that shows him saying, no, we came in through the patio doors because we didn't want to wake the children. Well, that's a direct lie. Now, I've managed to pick that up through my research, and it's an absolute lie. I want to know that those kind of things are known. You know, my videos.
Oh, yeah, those sorts of things are being looked at, yes. Whether they've been looked at or about to be looked at, we go through everything with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah. So
that's why it's been given to a murder team, because that's the sort of work we're used to, and we go through everything.